Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from central British Columbia, Canada, and all those people from around the world watching us. You say, oh, we know where Canada is, in British Columbia on the West Coast, right? Right, that's where we are. And today we have a very, very special guest. His name is John Geraghty. John is an executive coach, strategic advisor, and a trusted through partners to the business owners and leadership teams who want to lead with greater clarity, confidence, and purposes. After more than 20 years of working alongside highly successful entrepreneurs, executives, and growth-focused reorganization, Geraghty has identified the single greatest contributor to substantial success. Perspective is the issue, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. I'm really excited to be here. As I mentioned to you, I've listened to your podcast quite a few times. I really like your style, and I admire what you've been able to create for yourself in your life. You are an example of what I seek to help people envision as possible. So thanks for
I really appreciate the comments, John. So let's start with, about you. I read your podcast or read your bios. You have also are a podcaster, and I took a bit of a pause because of all the activity that you had, but we'll talk about that as well. Is that, so where did you, right now you're located in Florida, but where did you start all of this in entrepreneurship? Because what you build at still in early 60s, or 63 or 64 years old, you build an amazing amount of experience which you're putting to use now, focusing on entrepreneurs. And the key area, I agree with you 100%, is perspective, and what gives you the qualifications to comment on those issues and coach on those issues is your experience.
Right. So let me share a little bit about my experience, and I'll take you way back, not spend too much time there.
No.
But when I was growing up young, I grew up in South Jersey in a place called Willingboro, which was one of the Levitt towns, which are one of the original planned communities that were post World War II, the baby boomer generation. And so I grew up in a really kind of idyllic little community. To me, everybody, all the houses had kids. There were kids everywhere. Their schools were great. The community was really close. My parents weren't doing so great, so there was a little volatility in the home front, and so they ended up getting divorced they separated when I was 8, and they ended up divorcing by 11. But I really had no relationship with my father whatsoever from the time I was really maybe 9 on, and he ended up having forged my mom's signature on a mortgage document. So even though in the divorce we got the house, we really got nothing. So we had to move in with my grandparents, and we had to move across the country or south in the country down to Florida. And I moved to Florida when I was 11, and really just 3 weeks of school left in 5th grade. So not a great time to come, right? Kids aren't that welcoming. And so my first entrance into school, there were a couple of things that I noticed. One is nobody was really happy that I was there. A few kids were pretty aggressive as 11-year-olds. And then the second thing was New Jersey had just been really far ahead of South Florida in the educational system. So I was pretty far advanced academically. I was a pretty good athlete, things along those lines. And so life seemed to come easy to me at the beginning. But I grew up with a fixed mindset. My mom was very loving and, praising, but what she praised often was really, you are so smart, you are so talented, you are so capable, rather than your effort really allowed you to do X. Wow, you really put forth a lot of effort and therefore you created Y. And so what tends to happen in that situation is we become attached to our identity of being something rather than becoming something. And so as I moved a little further on and I kind of didn't have to push so hard in school, other people kind of caught up and I'd lost my momentum. And then when I went from middle school to high school, just lots of stuff happened. I realized as I got into a bigger pool, I wasn't necessarily the fastest, smartest, everything on the planet. And I also had a situation where I got really bad cystic acne, like one out of maybe 1% of the population goes through it. And although I probably wasn't quite as monstrous as I felt like I was.
So just going back, what did
Yeah.
you have? I didn't quite get that.
Cystic acne, like
What
acne,
is
really,
that?
really, really. Cystic acne is like not just like pimples, but you have gained. Like I would have acne on my neck that might have covered like the whole thing, and so I'd be in school, and I'd have something open up on my neck, and blood would come down me or
Oof.
down my back or whatever
Oof.
it was, and so it was tough, right? It's a tough
Yeah.
time. You're 14 years old.
It's a critical time.
Emotionally, I wasn't capable. I wasn't able to handle it.
No.
And so all these things were going on at the same time. And so rather than having understood that, that you have certain capacity and you have to lean in and continue to face the challenges, I kind of felt like my identity was crumbling beneath me, and I escaped. So rather than continuing to lean into life, I pulled back. And from 14 to 29, I drank alcoholically. I made it through high school, I made it through college, but I was kind of mediocre and all that. And actually continued even after college for several years until it really had become clear, like the path that I was on wasn't going to work. I was dating a girl at the time who was now actually my wife, but we'd gone out a few times. We went out one night and I got drunk and I don't recall this, but we went out to a breakfast place and she said I was almost passing out in my eggs. And so she told me the next morning, she's like, dude, you are embarrassing. I have no interest in being with someone like you.
It reminds me of something. We'll talk about it later.
But anyway, so what happened is I kind of realized, I was like, okay, she's not going to have any interest in me. And even if she were to go away, nobody else is really going to have any interest. And I'm not getting anywhere. I had no vision of the future. I had no real core values.
How
sometimes
old
you look
are
back
you
and
there? Is it 29?
29 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
29 years old.
Yeah.
And I, you look back and you go, oh, I was a pretty good person. But I really, honestly, I did whatever I needed to do. I didn't have a strong set of values. I didn't have a real vision for my future. I didn't really have a purpose. And I knew I was going nowhere. And so at that point, a lot of people will lean into AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a great program. I did not do that. I leaned into personal development. And it was right at the time, I don't know if you recall, when Anthony Robbins was coming out with his Personal Power tape series.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was on the TV all the time, right? Yeah. I think he's incredible talent. He's transformed so many people's lives. If when people pay attention to him, some people, oh, he's this, that. I know so many people who attribute life-changing to him. So let's give him that.
Yeah.
So for me, I just listened to that nonstop, and I started to build into my mind the idea like, okay, a different future was possible. And so once I'd worn out that tape set, I just started to read and consume information on personal development and, organizational development and vision and whatever I could. I was reading about a book a week, and I have kept that up for about 35 years. And so,
was she still your girlfriend at this point, or did she dump you?
She never did. She never did dump me. Came really close, but so yeah, we I guess we did break up for a period of time when I was gone. We broke up for about 3 months. A couple of years later, actually.
Right.
I was in New York. She was still in Florida, and then we got back together again. We've been married we're coming up on 30 years of marriage.
Right.
But so the thing that was interesting to me is I saw my life transform so much. Not just like, I started to get a grounding in my professional world. I started to do different things, but it was really just the quality of my life experience. It was transformed. I moved from really self-loathing and having no confidence. I wasn't good at keeping promises to myself when I was drinking.
You use the word self-loathing. Can you explain to us what that means for myself and my guests around the world?
So self-loathing is just, disliking oneself.
Yeah.
Right. Like at my core, there were two things going on. I was presenting a facade. So even during all this drinking stuff, I was able to, I had a decent job. I was, it wasn't like I was under a bridge, right? I had a nice little place. I had a nice car, those things. But I had no confidence that I could make a promise to myself and keep it, because I'd be like, I never want to drink again. And 2 days later, blacked out somewhere And so because I couldn't keep a promise to myself, I couldn't keep a promise to anyone else. And so as I started to lean in and really reevaluate and connect to values that would matter, I it felt great, right? It was like I felt more proud of who I was as a human being, not even looking at, like, it still took me a while to get my career going because, I really hadn't, I had to build but I liked who I was becoming. And so in that, I really leaned into a lot of that personal development, self-help information, and it was had such a big impact on me, I began to really want to share it. And so I had been in the fitness world, so I have a pretty good background in fitness. Even though I was drinking a lot, I was in the fitness world. Then I got into the financial world where I was really helping people, envision what they wanted to create, and then financially thinking about how do we make that happen. But what I ultimately leaned into was the part of financial planning I loved the most was helping people envision their future, talk about their goals. And I wanted to talk about a more comprehensive approach for me than just the finances, right? The finances were interesting, but it really wasn't the most compelling piece to me. It's really, really important. I'm not diminishing that work at all. It just wasn't what I was wired to do. And so I started leaning into thinking about how do I be more integrated in my financial planning, kind of bringing a coaching element to it. And then I realized, gosh, I just really want to coach. And so that's when I began to work with business owners. And when I talk about business owners, they were local business owners, a lot of them like professional services guys in financial services, attorneys, accountants, engineers, people that owned construction companies, architectural companies. And I really helped them to think about their vision for their future in the business, but also the other areas that I wanted to have conversations about, like their values and their relationships and their communication and their connection and their health. And so for 20 years, I did that. And as I've gone through that world, as I've matured, so have my clients. And so now I sit at a place where I'm 63. So most of my clients are 55 to 70, and they're financially successful professionals. They've done well. They put themselves in a position where they're good, and they could quit, right? They could retire. They could do the thing that everybody supposedly is looking forward to. But what I've experienced is that really most people aren't. Even when they get there, like I have a client that I just started working with recently who's been a friend of mine. He retired, sold out of a business, did really, really well. And I talked to him the other day. We were having lunch, and he said, he goes, it's not like I'm bored. I'm just not lit up. I don't have that. He goes, when I was building my business, I was like, every day I was inspired. I was challenged. I was growing. And so what I believe, and I think you believe, and you exemplify so well, is at this age, we are more resourced than we've ever been. We have more financial resources. We have better networks. We have more experience. We have more capabilities. And somehow society has convinced us that with all of that capability, the best thing for us to do is to check out and become like leisure all the time. Whether it's I'm golfing all the time or I'm fishing all the time or I'm traveling all the time. And while if somebody chooses that, that's fine. I just want to challenge the argument that that's the best way forward. Somebody wants it, great, that's your choice. But don't buy into the idea that that's your ideal future. I have a program called the Flow Cultivator, and it's really all around the creation of that psychological state, that physical state where we perform our best and feel amazing. And all the research there says that happens when we're appropriately challenged. We're kind of stretched right to the edge of our capabilities without going into overwhelm, but we're aligned with a purpose that matters, right? We're growing all the time. We're increasing the challenge. And because of that, and I've seen it for myself and the people I work with, I created a program because I want to build cohorts of people that are thinking about, hey, I am more capable than I've ever been. And I want to make sure the rest of my life is the best of my life, not something I'm gliding through, but something where I'm continually growing and developing and contributing and experiencing the connection that really only comes when we're fully engaged in life. And so that's what I'm lit up about. That's what really gets me excited.
I like it, John, because I see so many connections that are similar. So let me run quickly through some of the things. I was born in, as you
Absolutely.
already know, in 1940 in northeastern Holland, 10 minutes from the German border. So, so I was born November the 1st, 1940. So it makes me 85 years young, as I say today. And obviously, it was a difficult period because my mom and dad were married in 1938. They were in love. My dad worked for a little lumber mill. They rented half of a duplex, and they were the happiest people in the world. And they very quickly had a son and then a daughter, and then my mother was pregnant with me early 1940. And then what happened is Adolf Hitler decided that Poland should become part of Germany, and it was obvious that he was not going to stop there, so that he would do the same with Western Europe. And so my dad was called into the Dutch army in April of 1940, and the last time somebody saw him was just before the bombing of Rotterdam. And so where Hitler had decided, for the people watching us from around the world, that Holland didn't capitulate quick enough for his liking, so he bombed the center of this beautiful city, Rotterdam, and thousands of people died. And so for 5 years, my mom would not know if he lived or died. And so it was her with 2 kids and pregnant with me, and I was born November the 1st, 1940. And the first thing that I remember is bombers overhead from the Allied forces when I was about 3.5 years old, 1944. And so, and I still can still hear the hundreds of bombers going from the UK over northern Holland into Germany, bomb the German army infrastructure building alongside where Germany touches the North Sea, Hamburg, Wilhelmshaven, Kiel, and all those places. And she would take us, my mom would take us outside on a flat roof behind our house, because in the distance we could see the cities burning or the sky be red.
Wow.
But still, the bombers overhead is still a sound that I still remember. I will never hear it again. So, and the reason that she did is she felt safer outside than inside. And then the other part I remember is 1944. Hitler had decided to cut off all the food supply. So I remember my brother, my sister, myself, every morning we would go out into the rail yards with gunny sacks, pick up anything edible and burnable. And the reason we did as kids, because they wouldn't shoot us, they boot us one, but we'd be back the following day. And then the winter in 1944-45 was the coldest on record in Holland. And so I still remember sitting in this little room inside our house with the little bit of heating material that we had, wood or anything burnable. We sit very close to be freezing in the back, and it was hot and burning in the front virtually. And then I remember we were liberated by the Canadian Army as part of the Allied forces that landed in June of 1944 in Normandy between the United States, Canada, and the UK at great cost, started to liberate Europe. And the Americans want east and south. The Canadians want north through France, through Belgium, through the center, the western part of Holland, through the end, the top where we live, 10 minutes from the border, and push the Germans back out again. And it was pretty rough where we were. A lot of people during that period, even I remember as a kid, and it's amazing what you remember from those times, because there's always anxiety or stress of some sort or another, where they dragged people out of their houses. Some of them would never come back, as we know, and going into concentration camps. The Jewish population of Holland in that region in particular, and others would get shot. So saw far too much that we should not have seen. So that then being said, that's still part of my life even today, PTSD, the inner child. So the Canadians came in. It made such an impression on me that I knew from the time I was 5 years old that I knew as I grew up I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada, and that always stayed with me. And then the other part that always kind of stayed with me, I liked lumber. Now, academically, I was not a success story. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And they would say to my parents, who obviously cared about me and all the other things, what are you going to do with this guy? So people would say, why don't you send him to the mentally challenged school? He said, no, we're not going to do that. So my dad had a friend that had a furniture factory, and so my dad made a deal with his friend, and so he said, let's make him a furniture maker. So because the teachers and other people said, well, John will not amount to much because he doesn't have enough brains, so he can work with his hands, so train him as a furniture maker. So that's what I did at 12 and a half years old, and then did very well, actually went through it, and then worked for another company that my dad was involved with that was the largest importer of lumber in Western Europe. And then, but as I was sitting in my boarding room, already was an assistant manager of one of their operations, I had this feeling inside of me. I still wanted to go to the land of my heroes, and I was in the process of proving to me, not others, that I was just as smart as all the other ones. And so I wanted to start with nothing. And so I made the decision to go to Canada, go to British Columbia, that's where all the trees are. And then, so I had a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and on the plane to Montreal, took the train across Canada, Montreal to Vancouver. My God, 4 days, 5 nights. That is a long way. Came to Vancouver.
That's a long haul, huh?
I went to the immigration department. I couldn't speak English, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. And fortunately, there was a German fellow there. I could speak some German, so I told him what I wanted to do. He said, go north in British Columbia, Prince George. I'm still there now, although I do a lot of business in North America and have a place in Victoria and Vancouver. But I have my studio where we are today in northern British Columbia in Prince George. And so I came off the bus here, July of 1965, nearly 60 years ago, and 60 years ago actually, and so with I can still see where the Greyhound stopped here. The building is actually gone, but it's about two blocks away from us. And I came off the bus. I had my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes. I counted my money at least 3 times. I had $25.47. But what I did have, John, attitude. Even in the worst of circumstances, I always am positive. And no matter what, if you're negative, stay away from me. So, and then the other one, passion. Whatever I do, I give it 125%. The other one is work ethic. I work harder than anybody that I know around me. Is that I get up at 5:30 in the morning, I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And then the other part that I do, because I've seen, we are the luckiest people in the world in North America. And every morning when I get up, I look outside, and if there are people around me, I say it's paradise. And that's what I say every morning, because that's where we are. And the reason that I say it is that because I've seen the opposite. And in all fairness, without going into politics, I'm scared about what I saw then is that collectively, globally, and politics and all the other things, we're moving back to something that I'm afraid of in terms of we've seen it all. History has a habit of repeating itself. I hope collectively that we are smart enough to know, that war, potentially world war, can be devastating to everybody. And contrary to what some people may think, after war, that everything goes back to normal. It simply doesn't. It may take generations. And I've seen it, I've done it. The other part in terms of myself, I always lack confidence. And even when I came here, I started with nothing. Got a job in a lumber mill here as cleanup man, then lumber parlor. Within a year and a quarter, I was a superintendent of one of the largest sawmills here in northern BC, but I did not feel confident about me. And so still looking back, it didn't totally preoccupy me, but I didn't have the confidence, and I was not a good communicator. And then a couple of things happened to me that changed my life, other than the war years, obviously, and then going to Canada and going studying physics, nothing. But somebody said to me, I could communicate, but mainly with maybe 3 or 4 people in my companies. And by then already I had 4 or 5 different companies, and everybody said, oh, you're so successful. I didn't feel that way. And so it was lack of confidence deep down. And somebody said, hey, John, and that was in 1990, why don't you go with me to work on communication skills? We go to an organization called Toastmasters. I said, what is it all about? He said, it's about improving communication skills. I'd never heard about it before. And I said, okay, are they going to ask me questions? He said, no, just sit there, listen to them, and see what they are doing. Now, for our guests watching us around the world, if they Google it, Toastmasters, it's all over the world. Tens of millions of people have been part of it, through it, and it has improved their ability to communicate and make them more effective. So I went to a Toastmaster club. I was sitting there in the middle of the meeting. Somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about it. I said, oh, my God, I'll never go back. But I did. And right. All the years that I've been in Toastmasters, 10 years, I climbed all the way to the top. I'm a distinguished Toastmaster. And then,
that's awesome.
And then the other part about it, John, was that that gave me more confidence. I did that between 1990 and 2000, and then the other part about it that changed my life was happened in 1997, and I went to a bookstore here, January 1997. And I have no idea as to why I did what I did. I picked up a book. I will show it to you. This is the actual book that I picked up. January 1997, Driven to Distraction.
Okay.
Written by Dr. Edward Halliwell, medical doctor, professor.
Yep.
Has written 18 books, 5 on distraction, speaks all over the world, and he is ADHD and has dyslexia.
Right.
And I said, oh my God, that's me. And I wrote in the book in Dutch, because it was implied by some people that it was a mental disorder of some description. And I wrote in the book, now I finally know who I am. And so as I read more about the book and started Googling it and started studying and understanding it, I went to my doc that was a personal friend, 5 years later after I picked up the book, and delivered our 2 daughters. And he said to me, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. And so we checked it out, and I do. And so the more I found out about it, I came to the conclusion that it's very useful, and if you apply it correctly, it can, and it did for me, become a superpower. And so...
Tell me more about that. Tell me what about that made it a superpower for you.
It gave me confidence looking back at me, going through my failing grade 3, failing grade 7. If you would have asked me the question, even then in grade 3 and grade 7, after all and say, what did they talk about in the last hour? I have no idea, because I simply was not there physically.
Right.
And it started to realize then, John, that the frequency of occurrence in here, and then looking at it, I thought, the frequency of occurrence much broader, much deeper than I thought it would be. I thought maybe 6, 7%, maybe even 10%. Now, the interesting part is, you are my podcast number 519. I did a podcast with Dr. Halliwell. Is my podcast number 203. And so, can you believe it? So he changed my life. And so...
Right, that's amazing.
As we did the podcast, and I said to him, So that I came to the conclusion frequency of occurrence could well be, in my opinion, he's the expert, but I lived it and I watched people all around me, be at least 20%. He said, no, John, it's more than 25%. And I agree with him. And then the other part is that with all the things that I've done, and as you have, and got, and it's not about me how successful John is, but I have to give you purpose to a perspective of it. I have 10 different companies. I'm now an author, and I'm sit on board of directors. I know a lot of people that are very successful, as you do. I came to the conclusion, and I suggested that to Dr. Halliwell, that 50% of the people, successful entrepreneurs, business people, in my opinion, then when we did the podcast, I said, are ADHD. He said, no, John, 75%. I agree with him. And so it is potentially a superpower. And then I felt, if I look back at me and saying what was missing is obvious, that neurodiversity issues probably affect more than probably 30% of the global population. Women portray it differently than males, and a lot of times it is suppressed by individuals, but it's coming slowly more to the foreground. I felt I had an obligation to not only speak about it, and it's not something, it mixes into my podcast that I do. I do some presentation about this and others. But I write books. I had to write a book about it. I did. ADHD Unlocked. and then, so I feel now that I have an obligation to speak about it and communicate about it in terms of precisely the question that you asked me, is saying it's not a liability. It can be, and it is an asset. I believe it has the potential of being a superpower. So if I look at myself at 85, I do all the things that I do, and a lot of people say to me, how do you do all the stuff that you're doing? I say, ADHD, that's how I do it. And the other part
talk about perspective, right?
Exactly.
It's like the perspective. Somebody may feel like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing. And you look at it and say, well, what's great about this wiring? Why take the assumption that this is bad? It is what it is. What's the gift here, right? What's the blessing?
It is a gift and it is a blessing, in my opinion. And I believe that it changed everything for me. But if you kind of look back, that at 12 and a half years old, I was taken out of school because they said, well, you never will amount to much. And so it took me till I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 62. So for 50 years, I was sitting there, who am I? And then confidence to me was something that was lacking. Although I was successful in all the businesses, it was not until I went to Toastmasters, then found out about ADHD, that I found at a late age, in my 60s already and 70s, that who am I is really, I'm a storyteller. Right. And I write books. Obviously, I'm successful in my podcasting, and I like to share ideas and put things into perspective in terms of going through the challenges along the way. Is that my foundation, what makes me successful? And although we're going through lots of challenges, even now still, that all those challenges, and I wrote a book about that. The first one that I wrote actually is Against All Odds. And it's all not about how successful John is, but rather the opposite, is that those have become the foundation, and that, as we talked about earlier already, the foundation for you with your challenges and mine with mine has the experience. And that then leads us to this part in terms of saying what is important in life, especially but people say the last decade is even more important, is quality of life. That's what it is all about. Fitness, health, diet, and all of those things that makes me valuable to others in terms of sharing with them my experience and potentially applying parts of that to their own lives. And that to me is an obligation that I have, and I love to do it, and I do it in my podcasting and in my books.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk about the fitness piece and really so I think what's interesting is you kind of came to this awareness. You're about my age where you understand, right? You're my age when you first kind of go, oh my God, this is making sense,
Yeah.
right? I understand how I'm wired, why this was difficult for me to focus on this. And then, like we talked about perspective, perspective is so huge because we see what we expect to see. We see what we believe. And so when you talk about not having confidence, it sounds like a lot of that imposter syndrome, right? Everybody's like, you're doing great. And from externally, you really were doing things, but something inside you was saying, I don't see that what they see, because you were wrestling with something they were unaware of, right? You weren't running around, but you were like, I'm having a hard time paying attention. I'm distracted. I'm not focused in this area. And so, when we think about how do we frame our stories like heroes' journeys rather than victim stories, right? Like you came to the cave, you came to the challenge, and you met it and came out with a new set of skills rather than came to the challenge and withdrew. Like when I talked about when I was younger, right? Well, I came to the challenge and I withdrew. And so what we want to learn to do is come to our challenges in our lives and recognize like we do have a lot of capabilities. Let's look at the skills and capabilities we've developed through our lives and how do we bring them forward? And then the other piece that I think is just so important is your physical vitality as an 85-year-old. I want to, one, acknowledge you for it. And then also I want to say that's what's possible. If this was about you and saying, you know what, here's John Brink, and he's the only person that's 85 that can experience it, then it would be like some kind of anomaly one-off. But what's really true is if people do the things that are necessary to, the exercise, the sleep, the good nutrition, the mindset, things along those lines, then your life as an 85-year-old is very much available to many of us. Now, some people have genetic situations that are going to arise, but we should expect that and envision that.
I say not some of us, all of us, save and except for what you indicated.
Right. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that, as you already did, is saying, for me, it's a question of, I like to sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. And then the other thing that I do, as soon as I wake up, I drink 10 ounces of water before I do anything else. In the mornings, I usually have 3 or 4 boiled eggs and an avocado. Mid-morning, I do a protein drink that is all positive, good. And then I go to the gym, training with a trainer. And then I usually have a double protein drink for lunch. And then in the evening, I have something that is more substantial to give me the protein and then go forward. And I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't use drugs. And not any kind of drugs. And then I stay away from, my wife is a vegetarian, and I call myself 90-10 likely, and it took me time to get there.
90-10 vegetarian?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, the evidence is there. There's so much talk about like carnivorism or whatever. Like from what I've been able to see, that Mediterranean diet, mostly fruits, vegetables, nuts, legumes, the healthiest people on the planet as they age are eating that.
Exactly. And it is good, it's healthy, it's fit. I like it. And so I've done it it took me a long time to get there. And I didn't listen to my wife as well as I could have and should have for a long time. So we've been together for about 42 years, married for about 32 of it. And so, and then I've gone through the same period as you did, when things were very, very tough. At one point, I was drinking more than I should have. I was not going around like this, but relying on alcohol. And so then she hit me with a 2x4 across my head, and she dumped me. So, and so that's why I said,
it'll wake you up, won't it?
Yeah. So anyway, so then during that time I was smoking. I was trying to get off cigarettes, so I had a little people pipe that I was smoking, not good either. And then I was drinking, and then I was on prescribed Xanax by dark. And so I quit all of that in a week.
Wow.
And I don't know how I did it, but part of it was obviously she slapped me across my face, but more or less, so it woke me up. And so since the time I don't drink, I don't smoke. The hardest thing for me to get rid of was Xanax. And I don't use that, obviously. 30 years ago, I already stopped that. But
it does have a physical addictive component to it, right? Like
exactly.
Xanax is when they talk about getting off it, it's something you tend to titrate off of, just like titrate onto.
Yes.
But yeah, it's those things are tough. So what I think is great, that I'm so happy I'm here having this conversation with you, because in some ways I'm sitting here like looking at myself, 18 years from, or 22 years from now, and saying, this is possible, right? This is what the future can be. And what I also love is that it's not like I'm 85 and I never made any mistakes. Not that I'm 85 and I always, woke up and had the best meal and the best whatever. We can change. And what I think a lot of people miss out on is recognizing like how much more fit we can become as we age. If we're not at our optimal, if we're a world-class athlete, but most people are not. And so if I look back, I've always exercised, always whatever. But even when I was in my mid 40s, I was sober and doing all those things, and I was exercising, and I was eating decent food, but I was just eating too much of it, And so I had allowed myself to get heavier. And so if I look back at 45, I'm about 40 pounds lighter than I was when I was 45. And I move better. I'm more flexible. I have better physical coordination. Like, and again, I know that I'm 22 years your junior, but a lot of times people think even when they're 40, they're like, oh, I'm pretty healthy for my age. And I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? You're 40.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm healthy for my age. I'm like, dude, you could have 50 more years. Are you really going to allow yourself to decline for the next 50? And then you think about how many people that didn't make the awakening that you had, right? So from my age on, how many people have really miserable 63s to 85s, right? They may not have died yet, but they're probably wishing they did. And that's what I want people to look at, is the choices we make, especially as we age, radically changes what's possible, because you have to be intentional to maintain physical capacity as someone who's more mature.
Exactly.
And if you do it, you can. But if you don't, you're going downhill.
You see, in 2008, when I was 68 years old, I got a wake-up call. My wife already was vegetarian. I listened to her not quite as well as I could, and I got a case of diverticulitis. And for those people watching us, I'm not a doc. I'm just speaking from my experience. When it hurts on the right side, it could well be your appendix. Left side, it could be your colon, and it could be diverticulitis. If you go to the doc and he concludes that, he likely, and I'm not a doc, I'm a medical person, I just give you my experience, he would say, eat more greens, and blah, blah, blah. And so it will likely go away. In my case, it didn't. And I had a rupture, and so I was in Victoria at the time when I had the rupture. Extremely painful. I made it back to northern BC somehow. Went through the airport in Vancouver. From A gate to C gates, I'm a go-go guy. Normally it takes me 10 minutes. It took me more than a half an hour hanging on to the rail, because I knew if I go on my knee, somebody's going to call 911. And I made it as soon as I came to Prince George. Went to my doc. He said, get to the hospital right now. So they operated on me, took 20 centimeters out of my colon. And that was in 2008. And so at that point, I was 68 years old. I was not doing as well, didn't listen to my wife as well as I should in terms of diet and all the other things. I was not drinking, smoking, or doing that kind of stuff anymore. That was gone, but still was not quite as coordinated as I could be in terms of diet and exercise. I was doing the same up to that point as other people do. At the end of the year, I'm going to do this, that, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm going to buy a membership to the gym. And then 2 weeks later, I give you 100 reasons why I'm too busy to go to. So I knew what I had to do. Then in 2009, after this had healed, I got myself a trainer and started training. And after about 6 years of training, when I was in my mid-70s, somebody said, "Hey, John, have you ever thought about competing?" I said, "Me? Yeah." And I said, "Well, why not? Gives me a challenge, right?" And so I did. Competing bodybuilding and physique, became second bodybuilding, third in physique in northern BC, competed in the province, came in the same, competed then, qualified for the nationals and the Arnolds. And then the next thing that happened is that COVID came, and now again, I'm training for the Arnolds. And so that's where I am. And so what is the difference is that I'm not suggesting, as you already said as well, to become an Olympian or a bodybuilder. It's not necessary. Get exercise. Even if you start walking, walk a half an hour. Find a partner, your neighbor, your wife, your whoever. Go together and then start a little bit more, and then look at diet in terms of, I became then what I call a 90-10 vegetarian, and I like it. It does not have to be saying, for me, as I said, I sleep 7 to 9 hours, I drink 10 ounces of water, and then I'm aware of my meals and my diet. I like it. It doesn't have to be like medicine, if you wish. It's all good. And then going to the gym, I love going to the gym.
There you go. Yeah, that's what I think is really important, and it's another message. So I have a form of exercise I created called fitness presence, which is it's a combination of kind of like a Tai Chi, yoga, dance, and isokinetic strength training. So it works on every aspect of fitness. I used to work for the guy that really started high intensity strength training, Arthur Jones. And so you're familiar with Arthur, I'm imagining, right? Because he's the guy that started Nautilus. So I worked indirectly for Arthur back when I was 20. So I was always looking at exercise from this principle-centered way. And really, if you think about anything, and physical exercise is a great metaphor for life, is that we adapt to the environment that we're in, right? And so if you create a challenging environment, you're going to adapt to it. But you can only adapt from where you are. And so like you're just talking to somebody, if they haven't been exercising, start walking and have the vision that ultimately you can do many other things. But find what you like to do, because I exercise every single day. I've worked out every day for almost a decade now, and I've always worked out a lot. And people are like, "How are you so consistent?" I'm like, I freaking love it. How do you do that thing you really enjoy doing every day? I'm like, why would you not do something that you really enjoy? And if you haven't found your thing physically, keep looking.
Exactly.
Get in. I talk about, like, sometimes somebody will go, I'll say, I love my body. And if you'd asked me when I was 25, I'd say, oh yeah, I love my body, but I would have meant that I think I was really well built. But today, when I say I love my body, I literally mean I'm in a loving relationship with my body, right? I do for my body what it needs in order for it to really perform for me with exercise, nutrition, meditation, mindfulness, sleep, all those things. And then it loves me back.
And that's
right?
the point. Your body wants to be fit and healthy.
Right. Yeah. And then you can think about it, like, there was a thing that Mehmet Oz, who I'm not a big fan of, right? I'm not really fond of what's going on in our country as it relates to that. But recently, a couple days ago or so, he came out and said something about the idea, like, if we could just get people in a way that they started working a year earlier and they were healthy enough to work a year later, it could really change our economic system because all these people would be working or whatever. I don't like the motivation of it.
No.
But I do like the idea of thinking, why are we quitting at 65?
Exactly.
Not that it's something somebody's going to push on you, but, and I understand not everybody gets a situation where they are like you and I, we're choosing, we've built our lives, so we're choosing how we engage in the world. But if we had more of an intentionality around really understand what your gifts and your talents and your passions are, where do you want to be a contribution? And then like, why would we ever leave? Like, where do
Exactly.
you go? What
Exactly.
you really think you'd be happier like if you were sitting around somewhere, or
I
you'd be
couldn't.
healthy like you are if
I
you were
couldn't.
sitting around somewhere, right? And
I
so
l-
if
I
we could
love
have
what
a
I'm
bunch of
doing.
John Brinks, right? If we could have a bunch of, and again, everybody's gonna have their own. I don't mean John Brinks like we're gonna, but people that are passionate, that are living their whole lives fully engaged, continually challenge themselves, learning, contributing, then it is true we would change the economics, because there's so much capability that we can add to continue to contribute, that of course it's going to grow the economy.
Yes.
And in the process, it's going to grow our own personal economies, and it's going to grow. We're going to mentor people and develop them. They're going to have a model for what growing older looks like, different than they had before. They're going to say, what is, what, oh my God, I don't want to be 85. They're going to go, oh no, I can't wait. 85 looks like so much fun. John was smiling the whole time he was on his podcast. The guy's
Exactly.
having a blast,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And
Right.
and
Like,
and
who doesn't want that?
yeah. And then the other part about it, John, is and for those that say, well, I can't be, some people that tell me that they are 40, 45, 50, very much younger. And I say what will happen is start slowly. Don't believe you have to be a bodybuilder or an Olympian. No, start slowly, step by step, and then get a trainer. If you can't afford a trainer, then get somebody to once a week train with you for an hour to get you on the path, because training facilities for me initially were really challenging because everybody looks so good. I always kind of felt I go in there and everybody says, what is he doing here? But that's
Right.
not so.
And that's
They
true for a
also,
lot of people, right?
yeah, and,
A
and,
lot
and
of people are uncomfortable going into a facility, and some people aren't very welcoming and they're judgmental in those spaces. And that's a horrible thing too.
yeah, and I said it should not be that way, because when I see in my time going to the gym now, I've been doing this for more than 16 years. I like it, I enjoy it, and I encourage anybody to go to the gym or start walking. And what will happen is, hey, John and the other John, what are you doing? You look good. And so what I say is that I'm enjoying life. I enjoy, like after the podcast, actually, I'm going to my gym, for an hour, train out, and I love it. I enjoy it, and it becomes then the foundation of life. Now, the other comment that I'm going to make about, and we can spend another hour or two, I'm sure. So we may have to do at some point another podcast, but one of the things comes to mind when I see you and hear you, John, and I already explained to you what I went through, is you are a very effective communicator, and that is extremely important. I wrote a book about that part in particular because I wasn't up to the time of Toastmasters. So I wrote this book, and what is it about? It's not about how to make $1 billion, although you can, but it's
Yeah.
about communication skills. And what I said, how you can build a business empire through the power of words. And
Right.
so become an effective and good communicator is critical. All of those 6 or 7 individuals that I refer to are the classic ones that we all know, but made them successful. Either they had acquired communication skills, they usually have neurodiversity issues of some description or another, in all cases virtually, and then the other one is they acquired effective communication skills, which is the foundation to what made them successful. And that's why I wrote the book about that.
Thank you for that. I want to talk about that for a second because I love what you said, acquired. And I appreciate your, acknowledging that I'm an effective communicator. And I really kind of, it's been one of those things that I'm relatively gifted at, right? So it came kind of easy. But what's interesting, you bring up Toastmasters. So I'm 63 years old. I've spoken a lot. I've done a lot of presentations. I facilitate a lot of things along those lines. But I've never really thought about how do I become really good at this? And so a month ago, I joined Toastmasters, and for the first time ever. But again, and I kind of came in a little bit, truthfully, with a little bit of a there's some people that are at a different spot, right? They're coming in like the person that's just joining the gym and they're very out of shape. But there are a lot of people that are the guy at the gym that's very fit, right? There's a lot of people in there that are really good communicators. And so I was like, I want to impact the world in an effective way, and communication matters. And so even if I say, you know what, I'm naturally good, that's like somebody saying I'm a naturally good athlete. Well, there's no pro athlete that's like, yeah, I just kind of laid back on my natural abilities. You got to acquire and think about like, where's your gifts and how do you grow them? And it's just like the fitness thing. You start where you are, right? So you could be the really out of shape person that over time becomes super fit. And you can be the person that kind of stumbles with their words and over time learns to be a really good communicator. But wherever you are, figure out what the gifts are that you want to continue to grow in. Like, where are you pursuing mastery? Right? Because Jim Collins in Good to Great says, you know, why are there so few great companies? Because there's so many good companies. And the same thing is true in life, right? Why are so few people, why do so few people end up being remarkable communicators? Because even if you get good, you kind of like, oh, I'm competent. I'm pretty good. You know, you can drop me in front of a group and I'm pretty comfortable. But am I really engaging the people and giving them what I could be giving them in the time they're contributing, right? If somebody's going to give me an hour, I owe it to them to think about, am I communicating that as effectively as possible? Is there a way for me to help them see this so they can absorb it differently? And so again, you know, I want to keep getting better. I want to keep growing in the areas where I love what I love to, I do love to communicate. So go do that and get great at it. You know, whatever that thing is. And I got 22 years before I'm your age, and I can't wait to
And
see
I,
what I can
I,
do in that time.
I love it, John, because, you know, as I indicated, you know, in 1990, I was 50 when I became a Toastmaster. I was, and you're familiar with it, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of new people that came to Toastmaster and have anxiety. I've never seen a case that had as much anxiety as I had when I won there the first couple of weeks. I could have crawled out of there on hands and knees just to get away from it, but I didn't.
Right.
And I stayed the course, and I became a DTM, Distinguished Toastmaster, and so it has made me, and as you already indicated, I'm a natural storyteller, but I didn't know that. I developed that in writing books. I'm just finishing my 6th one that comes out in June. The title will be is You Can. And so, you know, and then the other one in terms of Toastmasters for the people watching us, and I get a lot of times asking me the question, what's Toastmasters all about? I say what it is about in the 10 years. As a DTM, I use it on my business card. I have the Order of British Columbia, and a number of other things, and I'm a DTM, Distinguished Toastmaster, and I'm proud of that. You know, it's 10 years of studying, really, to become a Toastmaster. But a lot of people ask me, what is Toastmaster all about, and what is the objective? The first one is to become a good listener. The second one, in my opinion, is to stand up impromptu and responding to questions in an articulate way as possible. The third one is to evaluate others, meaning, and then the fourth one is doing presentations, subscribe to the different books that they have, and go through it. For me, I've been in situations after situations where I say, thank you, Toastmasters, because no matter what situation you involve in, you can refer to that because you're a podcaster. My podcasters, I say right up front, and I'm uniquely different from a lot of other people. My podcast is an hour. I will not edit it unless there is a technical blip of some sort, and I will release it in 2 hours. Virtually nobody does that, but I do it. And you know why? Toastmasters. That is the foundation, and then obviously I'm a natural storyteller. And I'm interested in all the guests that I have a genuine interest in getting to know them. I love it, and then the other part is giving back to others, that saying you can too. and saying that, and that's why I tell some of the stories that I've gone through, being PTSD and blah blah blah, and all the other things, and failing grade 3 and grade 7, blah, all those stuff, and saying you can, but it will not be work. The same as we say with diet and all the other things, is that you will enjoy it, because all of a sudden they will then become, because of experience like I am, every morning when I get up, I get outside, I said, I'm in paradise.
Right. And that comes back to the perspective thing. I so appreciate having an opportunity to get to know you. I was really looking forward to this, and it was definitely everything I was looking forward to. So appreciate what you're doing in the world and the model that you're given, the leading by example, and just helping people recognize that living fully for our whole lives for a long time is not only, it's available to all of us. You're a great example, and it's available to all of us. This is what we should all be living 85 like that. So.
I love it, John. I really appreciate you being on my podcast. We're going to do more of this. I'm going to mention to Scott and Britt to kind of make sure that in the next 3 months, 4 months from now, maybe give you contact again. And then for all the people watching us from around the world, if you like what we are doing, both John, Geraghty, and myself, make sure you give us your how to contact yourself. Have you got a podcast number or a website, John?
The podcast is called The Prism of Perspective. Like the prism, like you're a prism, right? The Prism of Perspective. My website is my name, John-Geraghty, GERAGHTY.com. And inside there, you'll learn about the Flow Cultivator and Fitness Presence and all the different things that I'm doing.
I love it, John.
Thank
and
you.
then if you watch our podcast, you want to see more of it or give us a suggestion, subscribe to us, like it, share it with others, give us comments, because that precisely is how we can give back to the rest of the world, and it's global, and we like it and we enjoy it. John,
thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and we'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.